If you'd like to become a mnemonist or a person who excels at using memory techniques, it's actually pretty easy. Or at least it can be easy if you follow the right steps based on the right goals, which are not necessarily realistic goals. But what is a mnemonist anyway? I think that word has somewhat fallen out of favor, but I absolutely love it. The term mnemonist is related to the word mnemonic, which means memory technique. And so this means that a mnemonist is essentially someone who is skilled with using memory techniques. The term may also refer to a person who gives memory demonstrations like Harry Kinney and Harry Lorraine, and I've given memory demonstrations. It's a lot of fun. It can be someone who teaches memory techniques now, teaches them from experience. Anybody who's teaching you memory techniques who can't actually use them and demonstrate them to a certain level, not a mnemonist. Or it can be someone who does a combination of both, giving demonstrations and teaching the techniques. And one of the great sadnesses that I have is some of the best mnemonists have no interest in writing books. They have no interest in creating courses or anything like that. And so a lot of their experience comes through interviews rather than formal explanations in books and courses. But at the end of the day, there's a bit of a gray area here because sometimes people think that people with superior autobiographical memory, synesthesia, or other miracles of the mind are also mnemonists. But that's not necessarily the case. But also, we really don't know sometimes because the reporting isn't as detailed as we would like. So for example, there are people like Solomon Sherajevsky or Daniel Tammet where autism may have been involved. And there are cases where Daniel Tammet probably did use mnemonics. I mean, apparently he used to have a course where he taught memory techniques. So is it the case? I don't know, but at the end of the day, there's some mnemonistic activities there. Kim Peek appears to have not used mnemonics, yet at the same time, mental calculator Sal Piacente has successfully reproduced many of Peek's talents. He was a friend of Kim Peek, and one of his shows is called Rain Man, where he demonstrates these techniques, and it's just really, really interesting. You might also encounter people like Jill Price. She's associated with photographic memory, but technically has what used to be called hyperthemestic syndrome. Now they're calling superior autobiographical memory. And one of the first studies of this was based on Jill Price's case. But this condition is sometimes confused with photographic memory or eidetic memory, and it gets even more confused when some of the people with superior autobiographical memory, it turns out they do a lot of journaling, and there's some studies that have shown that there may be like an OCD level of journaling going on, or they may have a lot of photographs of their lives distributed around their rooms, and these are things that you can see in documentaries that I'm not going to have clips from on the screen just for copyright issues, blah, blah, blah. So those things are there for you to explore, and I've given you some names if you're interested. But in sum, a mnemonist has developed memory intake and output as a skill, and usually they're memorizing with intention, and they're memorizing information at volume. And virtually anyone who wants to have this skill can have it, provided they're willing to train for it. That's what this channel is all about. This is Dr. Anthony Metivier from magneticmerymethod.com. If you're new here, get subscribed. For the love of memory, hit thumbs up. It helps me train the robots to remember that humans really, really care about being able to remember with just their noggins. And once you've decided to be a mnemonist, your path is really straightforward. And the first thing that I would suggest is that you make a simple decision to be all in. Sadly, many people get into memory techniques and only make the decision to be all in when push comes to shove. They have no other choice. That's what happened to me. I mean, I wouldn't have gotten into memory techniques if I wasn't in a bad situation. Harry Lorraine, he decided to master his memory to escape punishment. In order to do it, he went to the library and devoted himself to figuring out what mnemonic devices are and how to use them. And, many, many stories of people hit rock bottom. And in my case, the memory techniques literally saved my life. And I may have gone a little overboard, but for a good cause, of course, which is the cause of helping others. More on that in a minute. But when I say be all in, I don't just mean read a lot of books on memory palaces, take the courses on memory palaces and memory techniques. I mean memorizing a lot of different information types. Be all in to widen what you can memorize and how you're able to memorize it. I sometimes call this holistic memory improvement. So I'm talking about vocabulary, names of people, numbers, symbols, playing cards, foreign language vocabulary and phrases, figures, literally shapes. Look at geometry and start to learn, what makes this shape different than that. And it's really going to help you expand your figural memory. And by doing this holistically, you'll start to deeply understand more about what memory really is and how you can make it work better on demand. Now, you got to start somewhere. So I think it's true to start simply and try to come up with a simple goal, but not too simple. So a first goal would be to memorize a list, for example. And you can do this by learning the peg word method, or maybe even use a simpler number rhyme system. So if you watch Sal Piacente's demonstration of Kim Peek's memory skills, you'll see him memorizing lists, and he uses either a simple number shape system or a number rhyme system. And that's like 1 is a bun, 2 is a shoe, 3 is a bee, that sort of thing. And so the cool thing about that is when people throw out things that you are to memorize, you just simply link it. So if someone says Paris, and that's the second item, if 2 is a shoe, then you're imagining the Eiffel Tower with a bunch of shoes balanced on top of it, or it's built out of shoes or something like that. And that at the same time helps you remember the core word, but also which number the word was. And this is a really powerful way to start. The next step would be to make friends in the memory community. There are many stages of learning. It's very useful to be able to speak with other people who are both behind and ahead of you at the same time. And you'll find lots of cool people doing amazing things in the memory community. For example, Braden Adams memorized 70 decks of playing cards for charity. Marno Herman, he went through the Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass. He broke a record in his country for reciting pi. Jesse Villalobos, he got a raise and a promotion. And you can listen to these people on the Magnetic Memory Method podcast sharing their stories and their experience, but get into conversation with people. There's so many examples like this, and these people are very often happy to share their experiences and the specific memory hacks they've explored. The next thing is to, as soon as possible, get into more advanced memory techniques. Please don't stop with just the basics. Move into developing your skills. Now, what exactly counts as an advanced technique is admittedly subjective, but in general, number rhyme systems, alphabetical mnemonics like the peg word method, these are simple compared with tactics like using a 00 to 99 PAO system based on the major or the Dominic system, however you want to construct it. I would suggest the major, but to each his own. And I think our preference for these different systems comes from a little bit of primacy effect, which is in memory, the idea that you're always kind of drawn towards what you encounter first. So I like the major mostly because it's more logical to me, but I probably have a little bit of primacy effect. The point is that the 00 to 99 PAO is more advanced. And at this stage, it's possible to get stuck with decision anxiety. So please just pick one and go with it. And you actually can have 2 PAO systems that are from the different sources. So you could have a Dominic and you could have a major system-based 00 to 99 PAO. It's really evading the skills that you're trying to build by not getting started, not leaning into more complicated techniques. And then you can go from there and explore the shadow. To this date, I still haven't explored the shadow very, very deeply, and I want to one of these days, but here's one of the issues to always consider, is that there is such a thing as the Not Now folder. And I don't really have any reason to know the shadow, which is, in my knowledge, the most advanced number system that's there. And it's advanced not because it's that different from a 00 to 99 PAO, but it's advanced because of the number of associations that you build. In any case, it's in the Not Now folder for me, just simply because I'm not going to use it. So I'm waiting for the time when I might actually use it, and then, well, that would be the time to move it into the Right Now folder. So that said, you want to also increase the complexity of your goals. So if you're not ready to take on more advanced memory techniques in your journey as a mnemonist, what you can do is just make your goals harder. So, you don't want to lead yourself into plateaus, or if you get into learning plateaus, you want to find ways to break out of them. So, 3-time USA memory champion John Graham has a great suggestion, which is to add distractions. So imagine you're memorizing pi or a series of numbers, but instead of just memorizing them, you have loud heavy metal on and you're doing push-ups. That's just one example of making it more challenging. Or you can keep yourself more challenged by becoming a trivia master, memorizing mantras in a foreign language as part of concentration meditation. You could learn any number of languages. Try to learn vocabulary in 5 languages at the same time, that sort of thing, and explore using different ways in memory palaces to have 5 words on a single station that reflect how those words play out in 5 different languages. One person who gives very interesting memory demonstrations of challenge is Nelson Dellis. He's memorized decks of cards underwater while climbing Mount Everest. That's taking challenge to the next level. The point is, you don't necessarily have to model it, but it could spring ideas. I think Ben Cardell has done card memorization while eating hot sauce or hot peppers. I mean, that's just going out of your way to increase the challenge. So you can do the challenge by having the actual situation of memorization be more challenging, or you can make the content more challenging. Now that I think about it, Harry Canet used to hang himself upside down, and he would be writing a poem with one hand, writing out digits with the other hand, while memorizing words that people were shouting out at him. So, there's lots of options to rake up the challenge. Myself, I like to take on more content challenges by memorizing more and more complicated things. And right now I'm working on learning geometry, and that is super complicated because there's a lot of names, and then memorizing the shapes, and then memorizing the roots and the progression of roots, and it's great. Okay, so also a mnemonist, I believe, this is just my belief, you don't have to accept it, is that the real deal memory techniques are not only in the past, but the stories that we learn about the mnemonists from the past have so much value, so much wisdom. Did you know that Aristotle was a memory master? He's one of the first people to write about the more advanced memory techniques based on the alphabet. I call it the nuclear alphabet, based on the way he described how each letter of the alphabet, when you hit it just the right way, has this explosive power to generate many, many associations. Then there are the Aboriginal memory techniques that are discussed by people like Tyson Yunkaporta and Lynn Kelly. You can hear both of them on the Magnetic Memory Method podcast in the archive. And perhaps my favorite mnemonists are people like Matteo Ricci and Giordano Bruno. They both traveled widely during the Renaissance, and we still feel their influence. In fact, it's a pet theory of mine that in the 20th century, the mnemonist Bruno first took that name as a reference to Giordano Bruno. I've never been able to actually note that Bruno first had a pen name. Maybe it was his real name, but then what a weird coincidence that someone named Bruno first would then take on teaching memory techniques. And the thing is that first, if memory serves, means royalty, like king or prince in German. And so Bruno first, the king of memory, which is what Giordano Bruno was. He was definitely high in the royalty scheme of memory techniques. Now, if you're interested in some of these historical things, I have written a book that is going to come out eventually called The Infinite Memory Palace Technique of Giordano Bruno. And it's not just about Bruno. It's about Aristotle. It's about Robert Flood. It's about Matteo Ricci to a smaller degree, and many of these figures who explored memory techniques to the nth degree. They really thought you could memorize everything, but also understand everything with a little bit of a twist, because infinity isn't necessarily real. And that's one of the things that Bruno was jabbering on about. Got him in hot water. He was eventually burned at the stake. If you'd like information about that, go to magneticmerrymethod.com/GB for Giordano Bruno, and you will be on the notification list for when that book goes live. And there's always little special things for people who are the first adopters of my new books. Along the lines of this new book that I'm putting out, keep studying other mnemonists. I mean, technically, your goal of studying the great mnemonic traditions is never done. There are new people who are coming up with ideas. Those ideas may closely reflect what already existed, but they're still wonderful to think through. It will keep everything alive in your brain. And, follow the Magnetic Memory Method podcast. We have many, many wonderful discussions, and I love hearing from new and upcoming people. And just recently, there's been some younger people on the podcast who are coming to this fresh. They're bringing just a newness to it because it's new to them. So it's never over. And I really appreciate how people like Harry Lorraine and Tony Buzan took me under their wing when I was younger. And there's just lots of people who have gifted me personally with their time in terms of consulting what I'm doing or just being on the podcast. I'm talking about lots of people who are not in the memory competition world as well, like John Michael Greer and Martin Fox. These are wonderful people who care deeply about memory techniques. They're very good at what they do, and they're mnemonists. And even if we don't agree with some of the people or we have different stopping points, because I don't always go into the spiritual things in quite the same way that some people do, they still have a lot to offer, and you can't let your like-dislike monster get in the way. If they're talking about memory, you want to know about them. Expand outside of just the performance-based, stunt-based, demonstration-based, competition-based memory techniques. That's going to help you come up with your own mnemonic style. The more you know, the more you can know. And the step that is perhaps the most optional of all is not optional. It is almost impossible to understand memory techniques properly without sharing it with others, without explaining what it is that you're doing, if only explaining to yourself. But teaching others is so empowering because it helps you see the blank spots in your own mind. It helps you enunciate what it is that's going on, and it will reveal to you your own practice. And one thing that people tell me all the time is they say, yes, I followed your advice of teaching others, but people just aren't interested in picking up these skills. It's like banging my head against a brick wall. I would suggest avoiding the conclusion that people aren't interested. Maybe that's the case, but teaching them will still be of benefit because you're going to learn more about how the world ticks, how different people operate, and just say, well, that's curious. Why aren't you interested in your memory? How do you experience your memory? What is it like to have your memory? And just have a general conversation about memory and keep an open mind. I mean, you'd be surprised what people will tell you, and then maybe they get more interested in what you have to say, but also just let go of the outcome. A lot of people are never going to take up chess. There's many, many people who are never going to go to debate club. There's all kinds of people who are never going to start a martial art, but that doesn't mean you can't learn from them and use the ways that they operate in the world to help you better focus on the fundamentals. So I hope you've seen that there are many different kinds of mnemonists. There are different goals that mnemonists can have. It's never really about memorizing lists of information. Yet, paradoxically, there's something about lists of information we need to consider. Because paradoxically, it's always about memorizing information in lists. And that's one of the objections that a lot of people have. And I want you to focus on that as you work on becoming a mnemonist. If you want to develop exceptional memory skills and call yourself a mnemonist, seek the truth about memory and the nature of information. That means being radically honest, because nothing is gained by trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes. Seek the truth about your own experience with memory techniques and give some demonstrations. And when you make a mistake, call a spade and just own it. Because when you're willing to talk about the mistakes that you've made, something I go out of my own way to do, you're going to help and inspire others who also want to enjoy superior memory skills. Go to magneticmemorymethod.com. Make sure you sign up for the free course if you don't have it already, or just dive into the Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass. And let's talk a little bit about lists, because the Memory Palace is very, very good for nonlinear learning. To explain more, I want you to really embrace lists, because everything that I've just said in this talk, everything I ever said in my TEDx talk, that was just a list. A speech is just a list of words coming out in linear form. But when you're learning a language, you want to be able to have morphological expression. You want to be able to combine things, right? How do you do it? Well, lists are actually the key. So I suggest you stick around and watch my video on overcoming the objection to lists next. You're going to be well served, whether you're going to become a mnemonist or not. Understanding that lists are the key to nonlinearity is so important to your progress with memory techniques as such.